I feel like we have so many people struggling today with what we call mental health issues, not mental illness, but mental health issues in the sense of anxiety and depression and stress and overwork. And the one thing I have realized, at least for me, 90% of my issues were self brought on because of my poor decisions and my poor choices. And had I been wiser with my money, had I done different things possibly in the marriage or sooner, I would have alleviated a lot of my stress, a lot of my anxiety, a lot of so one thing I always challenge men to do is just look at each aspect of their life, their mental health, physical health, financial health, spiritual health, relationship health, and look at all the areas where you can do better, where you have control over that, and start making those changes now before it's too late. Because we sit there and we just struggle with stress and anxiety and depression and cope with it through alcohol and food and money, trying to solve our problems. And that's just not the way to do it.
Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. Our guest in this episode is Richard Bischoff. Richard, I'm pumped to have you on, man. You've got a very inspiring story, a lot of value for men to learn from, not just dads, but men in general to learn from what you've overcome and all the excellence that you're bringing into the world. So welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you guys having me.
Dude, we're pumped. So why don't you start by introducing yourself to the audience, and we'll get into your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Richard Bischoff, 40 years old, live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This is home to me originally. Was born in Jersey, but my parents moved here when I was young. So so the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, have 3 kids and a fiance, and we'll get into that story. But currently I am in the mortgage business. I run a mortgage company. I'm a branch sales manager here in Myrtle Beach. And that's kind of part of my one of my jobs. And the other one is writing books and coaching.
Sorry, I had the mute button there. Yeah, man, that's awesome. So let's dive right in. I know that there's some real stuff to get through in your backstory, and I think it's going to help guys really understand a lot about themselves kind of through your eyes. So why don't you take us back to really, I guess, kind of the beginning, how you're brought up and kind of where that, as a young man, where you were kind of starting in the world, so to speak.
Yeah. So I am one of 6 kids. So when my parents moved here, they had 3 of us. I was 3, and I had an older brother and younger brother. And then when we got here, they had 3 more kids. And we moved to Myrtle Beach so that my dad could start a business. So he saw an ad in the paper in New Jersey for a carpet cleaning franchise to be opened in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or Greenville, South Carolina. And since they're from the beach in New Jersey, they wanted to stay near the beach. So they chose Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And so I was raised in a family where my dad ran the business out of home. So like, it was like ran it out of the back bedroom. It was pretty cool looking back on it. It's pretty cool to see how he built it from that. And grew up in a Christian household. Now, my dad grew up Methodist, and they didn't really go to church but on the holidays. So there was real no faith or religion relationship there. It was just by name only, and kind of somewhat similar on my mom's side, on the Catholic side. Mostly the holiday type thing. And they moved down here to Myrtle Beach, and someone invited them to a Bible study. And then that Bible study turned into a small group of church people launching a church. And then that just grew into obviously a larger church where we ended up going to church. So if it wasn't for that, I'm sure, and then someone inviting them to a Bible study and that getting them back into faith and becoming saved, and that's probably a super defining moment in my life. And I was only probably 5 years old. So that's a key aspect of how I was raised. And how I kind of talk about in my book. There's one chapter, The Pursuit of Greatness, and Ed Milet kind of talks about it too, becoming the one in your family that breaks those chains. So for me, my mom and dad were the ones who broke the spiritual change and made a big change for us as a family. Ed Milet, he came from a family that had addictions and was poor, and he was the one who became obviously a multi-millionaire and successful. Andy Elliott, kind of the same thing. You know, he came from a family of massively obese people, and you know, anybody would use that as an excuse. Your genetics. Everybody in your family is 300, 400 pounds. And if you look at Andy Elliott, he's one of the most jacked dudes you'll see
Yeah.
online right now. So it's just becoming that one that breaks the chain, the one that changes stuff for the future and helps create a legacy. And my mom and dad did that, making that decision all because of a friend invited them to a Bible study. But the reason why I really say that and make an emphasis on that, because that is my childhood. I mean, going to church on Sundays and Wednesdays. And then we joined, my mom decided to homeschool us. So we were homeschooled as well. So a lot of the church people were homeschooled. So there was a lot of that grounding and that faith and community that was there, which is important, especially having kids now. I mean, their friends are going to have the biggest influence on them. So looking back, I was so fortunate. None of my friends did drugs. None of my friends were out there being wild and doing inappropriate things. So I was never tempted to do drugs. I was never tempted to just do anything bad, drink, or I mean, I didn't really drink for the first time until I was 23 years old. And it was just never a temptation because of the people I was surrounded by. And so that, I mean, my childhood was playing sports and going to church. I played travel soccer. I was first introduced to the gym and working out when I was 15 because I was going over to Europe to play soccer, and my dad said I needed to gain a little weight. You know, I was a skinny little soccer player.
So you need to bulk up.
That's right. And so yeah, so he hired a personal trainer in the gym who actually happened to be a former Mr. South Carolina bodybuilding champion. And I got addicted to the weightlifting part. I mean, I love sports because I like to be competitive, but I got kind of addicted to the weight training part just because of putting on a little bit of muscle, how much confidence that gave me as a teenager, as a young man. So kind of got addicted to the fitness side about 15. Fast forward to college, I got my degree in health promotion. So it's kind of like, you know, the study of health and being healthy is kind of like a pre-doctorate if I wanted to go into the medical field or physical therapy and stuff like that. So it's like one step above physical education, a PE teacher, you know, it's like, it's just general health.
Right.
But while I was in college, I got certified as a personal trainer at 19 and then certified as a nutrition consultant. And I began personal training at 19. I would train clients at 6 a.m. and at 7 a.m., get done at 8, go to my 8:30 class, go to school at about 12:30. Then I'll go work for my dad for a few hours doing stuff in his office. And then I go work at the restaurant at night. And that was my life. I mean, I went to one party in college just because I was so busy. You know, I didn't want to have student loans. And I just wanted to, you know, graduate and get done. And so 4 years of college and was a personal trainer.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yeah.
Was that like desire and kind of just like, hey, I need to not be in debt? Was that a product of like how you were raised? Were you trained about kind of like what debt, you know, what it really is, or was that kind of just like a natural thing you had?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because further into my story, we'll get about how I was not wise with my money, and,
Right.
and I actually did end up getting into a little debt in college. Honestly, it was more or less just like I don't have the money, and we weren't going to get approved for student loans because my dad he owned his own business, so on paper it looks like you're making a lot more money than you are at first, and you know, so like he helped pay for tuition, but then you have books, and then I was living off
Sure.
campus, so I had my own rent and stuff like that. So it was either
Okay.
that or live with mom and dad.
So you just had to grind because there was no other option. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
and honestly, like growing up watching my dad work out of our house, I got to see work ethic. I mean, he worked a 40-hour a week. I didn't even know what that was because my dad worked 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours in a week starting his business, up at 4 a.m., not getting home sometimes if there was an emergency and they had to go out on the, you know, in the evening to fix something. So like for me, there really wasn't a choice. You know, like I didn't know there was an option where kids sleep until 11 on Saturdays and they don't do chores around the house.
Yeah.
Like my life was very, even from a young age, very structured and disciplined, which I loved.
What was your, you know, given that he had to work so much, did you have a pretty close relationship with him, or was it kind of that, I don't know what the right term is, kind of older school, like dad just goes to work a lot and then like mom raises the kids type of deal? Or like what was kind of the
Yeah.
dynamic of your relationship?
It was that. I mean, it was very traditional. I mean, my mom, she homeschooled all of us, and she has the patience of a saint. You know, she was so good at what she did. You know, people ask me all the time what I think about homeschooling, and I said it truly depends on the parent and the child. I had friends whose parents were not structured, not disciplined, allowed them to sleep until 11, wake up, have lunch, do whatever, do school from 12 until 1:30, and then they were done. And I was like, that's just, even as a kid, like I wasn't even jealous of my friends only doing that. I was just like, that's just something's not right about that, you know? So with us, it was structured. We were up, we did our chores, we did our devotionals, and then we got into school. So for us, it was a lot different, a lot structured, and I loved it. And even, going to college was a little scary because I didn't go to high school, so I remember going into college for the first time and just being so nervous about it. And then, college is so relaxed. People go in their pajamas. I couldn't believe it. I went to my first class and people were wearing their pajamas, and I was like, "You gotta be kidding me! This is crazy."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Now they're all wearing
so
Crocs and everything too. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was so crazy to me. I was homeschooled and I didn't even wear pajamas to my own school when I went. My parents made us get up and get dressed. And
Right.
these guys are going to college in their pajamas. But in college, the one mistake I made financially in college, I got rescued just because the housing market stayed good. But I bought a condo in college with a buddy. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was like, I'm going to get me some assets. And I mean, you got to think, I had 3 part-time jobs in college. Like, I'm a mortgage loan officer now, and I can't believe I got a loan back then looking back, but the rules were different. And that's why we had the issue we had. And that's why they made new rules. But I mean, I don't even know if I had a credit score. I know I had no real income to document, tips at a restaurant is under the table, personal training, people were paying me cash. Like, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But they approved me to buy a place with a buddy of mine who worked at Cracker Barrel as a waiter. So it's not like he had a better setup than I did. But so we bought that condo. And I put so much money on credit cards trying to fix it up because, we wanted to put floors in there, wanted to do this and do that. And when I say so much money, back then it was so much money. It was about $8,000, racked up on 3 credit cards, maxed them out. And I just was so tight on money and I didn't have money really left over anyway. And now I got to pay these bills. And then the guy I bought the house with didn't move in with me. He decided he wanted to rent elsewhere because it was taking too long to do the renovation. So I had to find someone else to rent because he was like, "Oh, just rent out the other room." It was a disaster. I say all that to say is I got stressed out there. Fortunately, the real estate market hadn't turned yet. This was in 2006, and we were able to sell it for a profit, split the money, and I paid off. So that was a lesson learned with financing, because up until that point, I was like, financing is fantastic. You mean I can buy all these things now and not have to pay for them now? And then you realize you got a bill that's coming due. And so that was my first big financial mistake, I guess you could say.
Gotcha.
I feel like there's got to be so much of a learning curve for somebody who is surrounded by so many good people, and then you went out into the college and the real world where there's just a whole variety of cultural differences and religious differences and all these things. And, you're suddenly surrounding yourself with people that might not have had that kind of legacy in raising. How did that affect you? Like, was there an adjustment period for you there, or did you just kind of jump in and just continue with what you learned, or?
No, it was definitely an adjustment period. I mean, it sounds bad to say because, I mean, it was just out of my ignorance. I mean, it might be true, but it could have just been from my ignorance. I just didn't realize there were people out there who had such low morals. And like, I just because I was sheltered. People say all the time, "You were so sheltered." I was like, I was, and it was amazing. And I wish that I could have stayed sheltered and not see the news, and not be around some of this crazy stuff. I mean, what's wrong with being sheltered from bad stuff, type deal. I was just so shocked. And I remember being in one of my classes, biology classes, and they were talking about homosexuality and about, all this stuff. And I just said, listen, I was like, I personally don't agree with that lifestyle. I said, I will treat nobody different, but I don't believe in that lifestyle. And they're like, well, how can you just say that they're born that way? And I said, no, ma'am, there's nothing in biology that says they are born that way. I said, we are all born with sin and different struggles. And my heart breaks for anybody who struggles with that. I couldn't imagine that being the struggle I deal with and not being able to act on it. So I have so much grace and love and empathy for them, but that doesn't change my perspective. It doesn't change, my faith and my belief. But yeah, it was definitely a culture shock. Fortunate for me, I went to class and I left. I didn't really deal with a ton of school stuff. Like I said, I went to one party. This is actually pretty funny. I went to one party in the whole 4 years, and we walked in and they had like dirt and grass on their table. And I was like, why wouldn't you clean that up if you're going to have a party? And like 5 seconds later, people sit down and start rolling it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's what it is. But that's how innocent it was. I didn't even notice or think of it.
That's funny. We interrupt this episode to talk about Synthesis Tutor, the world's first superhuman math tutor. It is warm, patient, and understanding, and adapts to your child so you never have to worry about them falling behind when it comes to math. In episode 84, we spoke to Chrisman Frank, the CEO of Synthesis, and immediately afterwards, I purchased Synthesis Tutor for my daughter, and it has been an absolute game changer for us. Math used to be a very painful experience. It was frustrating, and there was lots of tears for my daughter when it came to learning math. It's something she's not naturally good at, and we struggled a lot. Now she happily uses Synthesis Tutor every single week, and there's no more frustrating nights. The way it works is that it leverages AI to adapt the experience to your child to not simply master memorization of math facts, but it actually teaches the principles and concepts so that your child can independently solve problems without needing tons of outside help. Because it tailors the experience to your child, it is always adapting and learning where the child is in terms of their development, and it keeps them in the proximal zone of learning so that your child is being challenged but not getting frustrated or defeated by the experience. I am very pleased with our experience on Synthesis Tutor. My daughter's grades have improved in math. It's something that I can now outsource. I don't have to take the time myself to sit there and try and memorize facts with her. She gets excited to do it, and it's fun and engaging for her to learn instead of this frustrating experience, and it doesn't feel like a chore any longer. So we at the Present Fathers Podcast highly endorse Synthesis Tutor. There is also a Teams function for those with multiple kids or maybe multiple families want to pool their children together. You can check that out on the website. You can get 10% off with your purchase by going to synthesis.com/PFP. That's synthesis.com/PFP. Go there, check it out, and start supercharging your child's learning experience with the power of AI. Back to the episode. You're a much better man than I was in college. I went to just a few parties, But all right, let's fast forward. So you graduate and kind of step out in the world. Learned a few lessons now. What did life look like for you?
Yeah, so I got into personal training full time. I had over the 2.5 years I was personal training while I was in college. I was able to build up a clientele enough that I trained at a gym, and then they gave you like floor hours where you made like $8 an hour just to be on the floor to try to gain new clients and also be there for the gym if they had people that needed you. So I did that for about 2 years, and I just realized, like, after the gym takes their cut, let's say they charge $30 for an hour, $40, they take their cut, then you get taxed on the rest because you're an employee for the gym. It just wasn't cutting out. So I talked to a local gym owner, and I said, hey, can I just pay rent? Can I just pay a flat fee? I charge my clients, they'll pay for a membership. So you'll get my flat fee plus their membership monthly fee. And he said, yeah, absolutely. And that was a big game changer for me because I was able to charge them the same amount of money. I didn't have to reduce the cost. They were used to spending, 45 or 50, whatever the hourly pay was, that I was only getting half of. Now I get the full amount, and it's 1099, so I can write off expenses before I get there. So my workload stayed the same, and I would say that the money almost doubled. And so like that was pretty great. And I did that for a while. I had no plans on getting out of personal training. When people say, find something you love to do and you never work a day in your life, that was me with personal training. I mean, I absolutely loved it. had no problem waking up at 4 a.m. to train a client at 5. It was just something I really enjoyed doing. But what happens is if what you love to do doesn't make you enough money, then you got to typically do something you don't love to do, the kind of backfill it. And so for me, I had gotten engaged, and I knew that we were going to want to have kids after we got married and all that stuff. And so I was like, man, I need to make some more money. So I was just thinking of different things that I could do. Nothing that really stood out or made me passionate that I was like, oh, like that's what I want to do. And that's when, looking back, I got fortunate. At the time, I wanted nothing to do with it. But that's when a guy came in the gym to drop off a supplement for us to try. And we were just like, dude, you're like 65 years old. We're the gym guys. We'll tell you what supplements to take. You're not going to tell us what supplements to take. So like he came in and I was like, I'm not interested. And he goes, but it cured my gout. And I was like, well, I don't have gout. I don't care about that. And so he ended up leaving the product, and me and the gym owners took it. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And then that was it. But he came in a month later and he dropped off another one of their products, which was a healthy energy drink. And I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm either drinking a ton of coffee or smashing a Red Bull or Monster, several times during the day. If you're up at 4 a.m. to train clients, you're crashing, by 1 or 2. So I was like, okay, I'll try this product. And I really enjoyed it. I liked it. And I didn't share it with anybody, but then people came to me because I was a trainer at the gym drinking this product. So they're like, what are you drinking? What is that? I've never seen that. So I started to share it with them. Super natural. Just naturally, like not trying to sell. At this time, I wanted nothing to do with sales or, trying to get people to buy my product from me. But then my pastor came to me because he was part of that Team Impact where they travel around and roll frying pans, rip phone books, and then spread the gospel. So it's a really cool group, but he's part of that. And he always had this pain in his elbow, and like always had to get like cortisone shots for it and stuff like that. And then his doctor told him that his blood pressure was too high. He needed to get off Red Bull. And so he came to me, asked me about this energy drink I'm drinking. And he got on that. His pain in his elbow went away. He didn't have to get any more cortisone shots, and he told everybody. So I went from not wanting to do this as a business to making a couple $100 a month from the people who were asking me about it to the pastor getting on and telling everybody. And I was making $2,000 a month. And then I had another buddy who found out I was making $2,000 a month from not really doing a whole lot because it was the pastor who was telling everybody about it. And then he got on. He told his old friends. So I went up to $6,000 a month. And then before you know it, I'm making over $20,000 a month. And so I had to think, like, do I want to continue personal training for $4,000 a month when I'm making over $20,000 a month, not doing anything? And so I wanted some more time freedom stuff. So that's when I got out of the personal training, just because I was making enough money. I was traveling for that, enjoying that. So that was a fun part of my life from 2008 to 2015.
All right. Well, I mean, that's that's pretty awesome. Kind of what next then, right? So you're married now.
So what next? What next is the downfall. So life was good up until this point. Great childhood. Went to college, became a personal trainer. Loved what I did. Met a girl, got engaged, got married. This random new network marketing company that I didn't even want to get in took off, and it was amazing. But then that's 2008 is when I got in that. 2015, things are more stressful in my marriage. We're arguing a lot more. When you have enough money, I mean, I would never say I was loaded and rich, but when you have enough money, you can cover problems with money, especially like marital problems. You buy a purse, you go on an extra vacation, you buy a new car. And that's what I was doing. I was spending everything I was making on trying to make life fun for us to be happy, for things to be good. But that's not really fixing anything. So it kind of bubbled to a head when that company that I was in the network marketing company with shut down overnight. They got shut down by the FTC because of advertising. Some kids were advertising that, hey, you drop out of college, you don't need to go to college, sell this energy drink, you'll be rich, which we had a lot of students who were making more money than their professors, but that's still not what you should be saying. You're not allowed to be saying this stuff. And so the FTC came in, shut it down. Hindsight, they were able to open back up, but in that moment, it just destroyed the whole company. If you were to Google them as FTC, we're not making money. Our money got shut off overnight. So, I mean, you're talking about stressed out when you find out that 20 something $1,000 a month is no longer coming in, but yet you have about $8,000 to $10,000 in expenses that are still going to come out that next month. And so I said my first financial mistake was in college with the credit cards, racking up the bill to fix up that condo. My second big financial mistake was now. I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars and I did not have anything saved. Like I'm talking about, I had a couple $1,000. Part of it was because everybody that ordered it every month. It was on auto delivery. So like you kind of knew your money was coming in unless the company shuts down overnight. So like in my mind, I was like, the money's going to keep coming in. Also, on top of that, you're trying to have a little bit bigger house, a little bit nicer cars. And then you don't just get one car, you get two cars because, your wife doesn't work and you want her to have a nice car. And then all her friends are going on these trips and spa days and vacations. So then you want to give her an allowance so that she can go out and do what she wants to do because you think that's being a good husband, being a good provider. And so I had nothing saved though. I mean, I have no real excuse except that I was just not wise with my money. I should have had at least 100,000 plus saved in that situation. So had I been wise with my finances, that would have alleviated some stress. But since I wasn't, now I freaked out. I got back into personal training like day one. I got my real estate license. I sold 3 houses in 90 days. I mean, I was hustling. Anything I could do. I was working for my dad on the weekends. And it was just doing what I could. And then I was just getting burnt out. And another thing, when all that happened with that company that shut down, I was 10 days out from closing on a house. And so I had to call the mortgage lender and say, hey, I can't buy this house. I got no money coming in. And he said, well, why don't you come work for me? So he offered me the job on the spot when I said I couldn't come in, but I told him no, because it was like, I knew nothing about mortgages. What am I going to do in the mortgage world? I was a health major. After about 4 months, I was just like, man, I need to do something where I can build a career again. And that's when I went back to him and I said, listen, I need to make 6 figures, and I need to do it fast. And I said, can I do it in this? He said, yeah, absolutely. So that's my parlay into the mortgage field in 2016. But when all that was happening with that company shutting down and us losing the money, now the money wasn't there. So that exacerbated the problems in our marriage. And so even though I handled my money unwisely, I also was handling my marriage unwisely in the sense that I think looking back, I did a decent job as a spiritual leader, but not enough. And hindsight's always 2020. There's definitely more I could have done. But part of the issues that we were having was in 2014, when we had our last child, my daughter, she had a C-section and they gave her pain pills and prescription pills. And then a couple months later, she had a hysterectomy and they gave her more pain pills and sleeping pills and she got addicted. And I didn't know she got addicted because she wasn't telling me she was addicted. I just noticed that after 1 glass of wine, she was passing out. I was like, that's not possible off of 1 glass of wine. And then, it took probably close to a year for me to even figure out what was going on and us to start talking, her to start going to therapy. And so we separated for a time just because it was dangerous for the kids. My daughter was a year old at the time. My youngest child, who's 9 now, she was a year old. And she would leave her alone, just unsupervised. It was just unsafe. And so I separated temporarily so she'd get help. She went away to the treatment center for 4 weeks, came back, relapsed in 3 days, and pretty much just gave up. But yeah, then that started the divorce side. So in a matter of less than a year, I lost my income, had to start a new career, got divorced, and was fighting for custody of my 3 kids. And all on top of that, went through a bankruptcy because when I started with the mortgage company, they only offered me $10 an hour as an assistant until I got my license and got it going. So it was a 2000 end of 2015 and all of 2016 was really it was a humbling year because I had my identity as a good husband, as a multiple six-figure earner on my way to becoming a seven-figure earner, and speaking on stage in front of thousands of people. It was just one of those things that, my identity was just crushed because I had it in the wrong things. And so it was a very humbling time.
Yeah, man, a lot to unpack here. Let's kind of work backwards. Let's start with the identity thing, right? This is something I speak a lot. There's a big kind of part of my failures as a man and as a husband specifically was kind of that loss of identity, and it just like threw me off the deep end, But I don't think it's like I say this a lot. It's not unique to like veterans getting out of the military, right? I think veterans think this is just something we deal with. It's like, no, man. Any man who like has tied himself into what he does or how much money he makes is at risk of this phenomenon. So like, what are some of the like really hard truths you had to wrestle with, or did you have like these insecurities that your money kind of covered up, or like this status kind of covered up for you that now confronted with them you had to like really face and learn? And I guess the ultimate question here is like, what do other guys, especially younger men, kind of maybe going through a career change or something like that, need to take away from your experience?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I lost my identity because it was in the wrong things. You could say that, but at the same time, I realized that my identity is not really one thing. I obviously I find my identity first and foremost in my faith in being a follower of Jesus and being a created being of God's, in His image. So that's where I find my true identity. Besides that, we can have so many different multiple identities. I think the mistake is that we just latch on to one because of our insecurities or because of lack of self-confidence. And so for me growing up, it was my body, like being in shape, like that. My identity was being in shape. Like everybody knew me as the guy who always had abs. I was lean. I was a soccer player. I wasn't some big dude, but I was always in shape. So when I tore my chest in the bench press competition in 2011, my identity was shattered there because I was like, I'm no longer going to be symmetrical. I'm no longer going to be able to, bench what I bench. Like my identity in that moment was shattered. That was probably the first time. I think that I lost my identity. And then the second time was the money side because people saw me as the successful guy speaking on stage, driving nice cars, and all of a sudden it's like, dude, I gotta sell my car. So I'm like everybody who, because people hate on network marketing, multi-level marketing, and sometimes for good reason, but people hate on that. So people wanted to see me fail. I mean, it was shocking the stuff that they didn't say to me, but I'd had other friends come and tell me that other people said, and they were jealous. I mean, these are people who, there was a doctor a buddy of mine who was a doctor, and he was making $150,000 a year as a doctor with a medical degree, $150,000 in student loans, whatever the case is. And here I am selling a healthy energy drink, making twice what he's making. And people were jealous, but when that shut down, I was just embarrassed. I was like, man, people are going to, think that I'm not successful or that I couldn't hack it. Or, I think as men, sometimes we feel like a fraud. There's so many times I'm doing something, I was like, dude, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. And we're just doing it like that we're just going to try. And so like, I feel like, so I mean, I feel like I didn't want to be a fraud. Could I do it again? Could I make six figures again? And then you realize that the same skills that you use in one thing, you can apply those skills elsewhere. And I had a lot of good mentors and a lot of good coaches. Because I've always believed in good coaches. I think everybody should have a coach. I mean, I got 3 different coaches right now for different things. I think that anybody who's looking to grow should. And I think the stuff that I learned leading up to my collapse, you could say, or my failure year, a lot helped me get through it. I heard Eric Thomas say one time, a setback is just set up for a comeback. And I was like, I'm not going to be the guy who used to do this, the guy who used to, be successful. And I was like, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to come back better and stronger and just then help other people do the same thing. Because I know I'm not the only one who's gone through a failure. That's for sure.
Yeah, that resilience to get back up again. It's like there's almost nothing sadder than like the guy who just talks about what he used to be,
It's brutal.
Like
you hear it in the gym all the time.
Guy who's like, man, I used to be such an athlete or whatever. It's like, well, why aren't you still? I mean, like it's just, it's sad. You're just clinging on to a past version of yourself. And so, appreciate you sharing so candidly, man. I know this is painful stuff, and but I think there's a lot of guys out there. We go through something that really knocks
Yeah.
us down like that, and I can definitely relate to having some pretty humbling years and having to get
Yeah.
back up from them. So appreciate
And the
that.
thing is, other people are going through them, and if we don't share our stories, sometimes they don't realize they can get through it, and then they don't realize that, hey, I'm allowed to share my story too. Because there's people who just need to hear. I spoke at a ceremony for a place here in town called the Father's Place, or a Father's Place, and it's for men and helps men with custody stuff. It helps them get back on their feet after jail or addiction or different stuff, and it's really cool place because men don't have a lot of access to things that women or other people do. So and just seeing these guys, just they're coming out of their hole, and I remember being there. I remember being like on the way back up because you spend so much time drowning at first when you're going through a crisis, whether someone's going through a job loss or someone's going through a marriage issue or someone's going through anything, a health issue. Sometimes you just feel so overwhelmed that you just don't even know what to do first. And I felt like that probably for close to 9 months, because most of it being because of the child custody battle and just not thinking I was going to get anywhere with that. But yeah, there's for sure power in sharing your story. So that's what I'm all about, is sharing my story. Not for me because it's embarrassing to share my failures, but for other men to see that they can make it through.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about men being equipped to take on the challenges of life that
Yeah.
are very weight bearing. So for me personally, I feel like suffering and cruelty are some of the two necessary components that creates the necessity of a growth mindset. So can you tell us like how the suffering that you experienced with your wife and with all these things helped you switch into a growth mindset and help you grow into a stronger man?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I'll be honest, it was just the fear of being a failure. It was that fear of people seeing me, and not even just other people seeing me, but I mean, honestly, probably my parents, because I've always wanted to make them proud. That's just, for some reason, that was just ingrained in me as a kid, and not from them. I honestly think it's because I was a child of six and I was one of the older ones. So every time there's a kid born after me, they needed more attention. So I think I just wanted to be seen. And I think one of the best ways to be seen was to be good, obedient, because they would always tell their friends, and my friends' parents would tell my parents, Richard was such a good boy and he was so nice and polite. And when I got that positive feedback, man, I just went with it and I just did more of the positive things. And I just always wanted to make my parents proud, and seeing my dad work so hard, and with his business, and he had ups and downs as well. I think the hardest thing for me was just having to change to a whole new career. Like in network marketing, you're selling a product. I can't just switch to another company and start selling a new product. People would be like, "You told me this was the best product," and so for me, it was that switching careers that was the most difficult, in the midst of still going through the divorce, still going through the bankruptcy, still going through the child custody battle. I was starting a new career while all three of those massive things were going on in my life. And how I had a growth mindset was, honestly, I just didn't feel like I had an option. Like sometimes I hear people complaining, and I was like, "Why are you complaining? You don't have an option. You got to do it." Like, there's no point in complaining. You got to do it. You got to put in the work. So I guess honestly, I just really didn't feel like I had an option as well.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the addiction part and the suffering, the bankruptcy, all that. That's all this suffering. What was like for the guy that is about to go through or is going through this currently? What kind of advice would you give him to help him shield his children from these hardships?
Oh, that's a good question. So shielding I didn't know where you're going with that until the end, and you threw in the shielding your children. I, I think it's important to let them know that everything's going to be okay. And also depending on their age. I think if my kids were their age now, I'd probably have a little bit more honest conversations with them. I mean, my boys are 11 and 12. So I feel like we're having conversations now that are pretty cool and much more in depth. But at that time, when they were 3 and 5, I just wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to be, happy. And this was a time when we were going back and forth with custody. So we were fighting for custody, but she had them for 7 days. I had them for 7 days, and the days that I didn't have them were just miserable. Like, I mean, I couldn't sleep. I was worried about their safety. It'd be different a little bit if she wasn't struggling with, addiction. But because she was struggling with addiction, I was so worried. I was so stressed. So yeah, that was pretty brutal. But the main goal was just making sure that the normal life went on for the kids as best as possible until we figured out what was it going to be like long term, permanent, which was a scary thought.
Do you have any, just real quick one, and then I want to kind of get into a little bit of a different topic, but do you have any plans to like share more with them as they continue to mature, to make sure that they kind of, I don't know, it's like I've heard a lot of input from men on this podcast being like, we're pretty candid with our kids, and that seems to be the right answer nowadays, because like your kids figure out that you were hiding stuff, right? And so I guess balancing like oversharing with, I don't want them to think we have this like dirty little secret we can't address. Like where are you at with that, and what is your kind of game plan for how to effectively teach them kind of the hard lessons that need to be learned from this past, right? And obviously it's not the ideal, but it is their past, right or wrong, And so, there's an element of here where you're going to have to kind of guide them through that. What's that going to look like, or how do you plan to do that?
For me is just asking them questions and then answering them. I'm not going to just give them information. I mean, honestly, I don't think kids want to know as much as parents want to tell them. I think parents tell their kids stuff to get them off their chest. And there's nothing wrong with being candid. I don't have an issue with that. It's just sometimes kids just want to be kids. They don't want to think mommy was bad or daddy was bad. So, I mean, even to this day, we haven't seen her in 6.5 years, however long it's been. And I don't talk bad about her. The kids never bring her up. They were so young, but I'll ask them every once in a while. I'll say, do you ever think about your mom? They call her their old mommy, because I've been with my fiance for several years now, but they would say, no, never think of my old mommy. I was like, well, if you have any questions, you can talk about her. You can ask to see a picture of her. You can, that's your biological mother. And until she started to have some issues, which I haven't really gone into, I say she was a great mom. She loved you guys. So like, I just make sure that, because I hope and pray one day she comes back into their lives. Not for my sake, but for her sake, I do, because I want her to break the addiction. I want her to have a relationship with her kids. And if all I did was talk bad about her, they wouldn't want that in the future. And I think it would be awkward, obviously, after not seeing someone for so long. But yeah, so I mean, in the future, I'll continue to ask them questions and let them know that I'm here to talk about them. But I don't think I'll go into it a whole lot if they don't ask.
Yeah, that seems like a very wise approach. And I love that tactic of kind of just ask first, right?
Right.
And not very, very different experiences, but like, kids will hear things at school or whatever, right? And so like a tactic that we've learned, my wife and I, is like, don't just leap to the conclusion that your kid thinks that means what it actually means. And like ask them first, what do you think that means? And then be like, whoa, if I would have just leapt into that, I would have like really shattered their innocence unnecessarily here, So that's a great tactic. I really like that a lot. And then you also raise an extremely good point that we've also heard echoed a lot here from experts on kind of like co-parenting is never badmouth the other parent. And it's so critical, because your kids will know, like, I'm part of mommy. So if you're badmouthing, the other parent, like the kids are going to take that on for themselves too, in a way, because they're not idiots. They know where they come from, right? And I think that's very wise and required of you to not badmouth her, because if the door ever does open for reconciliation there, that will be a very healing experience for your children, even if it's a very superficial relationship. There's a level of closure and healing that comes from that will help them later in life. So, if it never comes, obviously we don't want that to happen, but really good points there. And so this dovetails really well into what I wanted you to speak to next was, obviously she's been out of the picture for many years now, right? So I think you said it was since 2018.
Yeah, it's June 2018.
Okay, so your kids haven't seen her either for a long time now. You've been a single dad with full custody of 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a unique situation, right? Normally single dads are kind of splitting time. So one, how did you like even manage that in the first place, especially with all this stress and having to kind of build your life back? And what are some practical lessons you've learned there that, single dads can kind of take away from this?
Yeah. First and foremost, I was so happy to get sole custody of them. That was it was such a long battle. We had four different judges who didn't know anything about the case. Every time we sat in front of them, we had a guardian ad litem who was 100% on her side, not even a close second, until the very end. And then, like, I remember having a conversation with my parents and just saying, like, I give up in the sense that I I know God loves these kids more than I do. So if I don't get custody, I'm trusting that he's going to protect them because he loves them more than I do. So he's going to protect them. Maybe there's some weird reason why I don't get custody or something, but it was just getting so frustrating that I was stressing about it so much. I was like, I just got to let go and let God, so to speak. And then within 2 weeks, her mom wrote an affidavit for me. The babysitter that she had wrote an affidavit for me. The irrigation guy who found, her passed out in the middle of the day wrote a letter for me. So then they had no choice. The judge and the guardian ad litem was like, okay, like obviously if her own mom and the people she's paying, like the babysitter and other people are going to say something. So, I mean, it was a miracle. I mean, it truly was a miracle. And so I say that to say that I was so happy that I got them and that I didn't have to pay her child support. Like I was like so like angry that I could potentially have to pay her child support and me not have my kids full time. I was like, that's ridiculous. And so the fact that I was getting them full time and didn't have to pay child support was so amazing that I didn't think about all the work I was going to have to do. I mean, my daughter was a year and a half. She had just turned 2 at this time. My son is 4, another son is 5.5, maybe just turned 6. And I mean, that's hard. I mean, still in diapers, me starting my new career so I had a lot of help from my sister-in-law, who was a school teacher. I had help from my mom. My mom and dad are great. They have 13 grandkids right now with 3 more on the way. So like, I mean, my parents are awesome with helping. And mine were the first kids. So they didn't have as many grandkids back then. So between my parents' help and, other help, I was able to do it. And then I quickly became a loan officer. So even though I started as an assistant making $10 an hour, I quickly got past my test and became a loan officer because then I was basically self-employed in the sense that I can work my own hours. I can do what I had to do. So I just learned to become very efficient with my time. I probably only worked about 20 hours a week because, I had to do drop-offs and pick-offs from school and daycare and, field trips and stuff like that. So, I mean, besides the crazy height of the market in 2020, end of 2020 and early in 2021, when we were just so busy with refinances, I probably only average about 20 hours a week, doing what I do, just because I had to learn to become efficient with my time. I think a lot of people think they're working when they're not really working. But that me becoming efficient with time allowed me to be there for them. Every field trip, every school event, graduation, concert, whatever, coaching their soccer team. It's been amazing. And I know most parents probably say that, but my kids are like the best kids in the sense that they've never thrown a temper tantrum. They never told me no. They literally are so obedient. Now they're kids, so they'll forget stuff or they'll make mistakes and stuff like that, but they are just so easy. I feel like God just blessed me so much. We never had the terrible 2s, terrible 3s, never had any issues. Everybody says, wait till they're teenagers. And I was like, well, so far so good. So I've been very blessed with good kids and a job that is flexible so I can be there for everything.
Man, that's awesome. So you had mentioned that your parents had broken a lot of spiritual chains or generational curses that were passed down generationally. So what were some of the things or what are some of the things now that you're currently wanting to break as far as chains for your children's sake?
So obviously I want to keep the faith part going. So I don't know if there's necessarily anything in that area where there's change the break. I would say from my past failures, it's on the financial side. It's being wise with money because when I now look back and I look at my dad's kind of the same way. Like he's always been able to outwork his problems or outwork his financial lack of wisdom, if you want to say that. He built a successful company, still has it today, so he makes plenty of money, but he was never the best at saving money or investing money. Or when he did, he would invest it into something like the real estate market in 2007 and 8, right before it crashed, and have over $1 million just disappear. So like one of the things my dad said to me when I was young, and I think it just always stayed with me, he said, "It's just money. You can always make more of it," which in one sense is good. Yeah, don't become a slave to money. It's just money. You can make more of it. But on another sense, it's like time, like Jim Rohn says, winter's coming. Like there's always a winter that follows fall, which follows summer. So we're going to have good times and we're going to have bad times. And my dad nothing stresses him out. And I'm different. A lot of stuff stresses me out. So I try to get rid of the stress that's in my life, whereas he just handles it. And financially, that's just honestly probably one of my biggest regrets. Obviously I have other regrets, but I mean, I should be a multi-millionaire net worth if I would have been wise with my money and listened and followed certain simple, practical advices. And I didn't. I wanted that bigger house, the nicer car, the other vacation. I wanted the quick money and invested in things and lost over 100 grand, so I think with my kids, I'm already teaching them now financially. We have that green light debit card thing that we just had. So they have money that goes to savings, money that goes to the spend account, money that goes to giving, like tithing, and then money for investing. And I'm just letting them know, hey, when you get your allowance, when you get $5 a week, you don't get $5 to spend. Just like in the real life, you're going to have taxes, you're going to have other things that you have to be paid, and you need to pay yourself first, in the sense like pay God, the tithe, to give a little, but then save a little, and then spend, what you have after you've, saved and invested. So I think from my standpoint, that would probably be the big one, because spiritually, nobody's perfect. I don't want it to come across like that at all, but we had a leave it to beaver or whatever, like lifestyle. Like it was about as good as it can be childhood wise. And then faith wise was just so strong. It's still something that's strong to this day. And then fitness wise, fitness has just always been, health's always been a big part of my parents met in the gym. And then I'm not married to her anymore, but I met my ex-wife in the gym. So fitness has always been big. So I would say the financial chains is the one that I'm still in the process of breaking myself, but teaching my kids as we go and being honest with them. Like, hey, daddy made a mistake. He shouldn't have got this car. He shouldn't have done this. He should have saved. He should have invested. And so trying to teach them through my mistakes.
And that's such a crucial thing, man, because finance is kind of one of the things, whether it's homeschool or just public school, private school, whatever the case may be, in schooling in general, is sorely missing. And, I was kind of blessed in the fact that when I was working a job, I had to drive a lot in college, and I had the radio on, and it was Dave Ramsey. And so I kind of got my own Financial Peace University for free on the radio, listening to other people's pitfalls, and it really taught me to manage my money well. And so now, like with my kids, like you said, they have a budget. So like I give them like $10 a week if they do their chores, do all that stuff. Okay. But I charge them $1 for rent, $1 for groceries. Like they've got these little things and it teaches them real world application, right? But I love that, because finance is one of the things that really is crucial besides your spiritual that needs to be solid. So that's so good.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. I mean, that's something, I wasn't very financially literate,
Right.
And, when we started this podcast, right, one of the first episodes we did was on the psychology of money, and our co-host Dustin led that whole discussion and everything. And I during the discussion, I'm like, oh man, I have so much I need to learn. Like, this is kind of embarrassing. I'm getting exposed here in real time on this podcast, But it's such a good point, though, because this is the kind of lessons that if you teach your kids wisely, like I have friends who are, successful entrepreneurs, and they basically give their kids, they're like, look, I'll seed you some funding to start a business, come up with an idea. Let's try and see if you can get profitable. And they're like a teenager, right? And so if you learn those lessons as a teenager, you're kind of set as an adult. Like, I mean, how can you fail managing your money from that point? Like, you'll have so much responsibility and appreciation for it, and it's you have to know it. We gloss over it, I feel like, as parents, or at least our parents did. And it's kind of one of the most fundamental things you have to have mastery over.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then just one thing I want to say on that whole time period that I went through. I talk about mental health in my book. There's a small chapter in there. Just I'm not a mental health expert, but I have seen therapists for multiple reasons, going through divorce and bankruptcy and just handling your emotions. And I feel like we have so many people struggling today with what we call mental health issues, not mental illness, but mental health issues in the sense of anxiety and depression and stress and overwork. And the one thing I have realized, at least for me, 90% of my issues were self brought on because of my poor decisions and my poor choices. And had I been wiser with my money, had I done different things possibly in the marriage or sooner, I would have alleviated a lot of my stress, a lot of my anxiety, a lot of so one thing I always challenge men to do is just look at each aspect of their life, their mental health, physical health, financial health, spiritual health, relationship health, and look at all the areas where you can do better, where you have control over that, and start making those changes now before it's too late. Because we sit there and we just struggle with stress and anxiety and depression and cope with it through alcohol and food and money, trying to solve our problems. And that's just not the way to do it.
Yeah, man, I'm really glad you said that. I agree completely. If anyone who listens to my personal story, it's all self-inflicted.
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
I'm literally the walking poster board for like, handle your stuff. Otherwise it's going to get you, and I empathize with guys listening to this. If you're struggling, I empathize with you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's fierce empathy. Like, you have to pick yourself up. No one's coming to save you. No one's going to come knock on your door and be like, here's the answer to all your problems, bro. You have to step up and start taking action. And then people will recognize that you're on that path and start presenting themselves to you. But
Absolutely.
no one's going to just come hunt you down and try and solve your life for you. So unfortunately, men, that's the burden of being a man, is the responsibility rests with you. The sake of your family depends on whether or not you're going to take the first action. So, Richard did it, I did it, and I'm not going to say that I'm like some special person. It's just kind of the way it goes. And when you start to step up, Richard, I'd love for you to kind of bounce back off of this. I'm sure you had a lot of people start to help you along the way, right? Outside of kind of who you listed with the child care aspect, but other men kind of guiding you and helping you and kind of being that brotherhood for you to get you through those tough times and help you rise back up to where you needed to be. It's typically how it works.
Well, on that real quick is I made the mistake of isolating a little too much because
Same.
I didn't want people to know my failures, partly. And then two, I didn't want to bring other people down. Like my best friend, who I was the best man at his wedding, he was going through his happiest moments of his life, about to have their first child. And I did not want to bring my drama and my stress into his life. So I retreated from a lot of people, which looking back was a mistake. So that's another thing I tell men: if you're going through stuff, don't isolate. Find a mentor, a coach, a counselor, a therapist, a best friend, a group of guys, a community group. People have been where you are, so they can help you through it. And even if they haven't, they can still pray for you. They can still be there for you and still give words of wisdom. So that's one mistake I made that I wish I would have done differently.
Yeah, and just to that point too, I mean, I see that play out a lot with the guys I work with, is that feeling of like, oh, well, I'm just going to be a burden to them, or I'm just going to drag them down.
Right.
It's almost always the opposite, man. Like if someone comes to me and says like, hey, dude, I really need your advice right now, I feel good because like he trusts me enough to be the guy to fix his problem for him or to hear him through this, right? And I have not seen anyone be like, I don't have time for that. You know, I mean, every single man who respects you or is your close friend or something like that, they're going to feel good about you bringing your problems to them, right? Otherwise, they're not really your friend, right? That's an answer in and of itself right there. But, that I think that's something that we as men fall into. It's like, it's almost this like ego pride thing. And in reality, it's like, man, that dude is probably going to be uplifted by the fact that you're courageously transparent enough. My esteemed colleague, Brandon, came up with that term, and I love it so much. Because it inherently says that you have extra respect for him to share this hard thing with him, right? So guys out there, like, you have to take the first step. You have to put it out there to someone that you can trust, and more likely than not, they will give you the help you need, or at least start you down the path you need to be on, and you don't have to walk it alone. So you have to take the first movement, but people will certainly support you. I've yet to see anyone genuinely ask for real help from other people and be turned away. So yeah, we can kind of tie that off there. But Richard, I think thanks so much for like being very honest about your journey through these very difficult things. I'd love to kind of progress a little bit to where you are today, right? So you met your fiance. You guys are, engaged now to be married, and she'll take over as kind of stepmom, right, for your kids. But can you just talk a little bit about that too? Introducing her to your children and kind of starting a new life after divorce, because that's, statistically half our listeners will probably be in a similar boat, right? So I think that's a very valuable discussion for us to have.
Well, one of my fears was once I got sole custody of them, not that it was a big deal to me, but I was like, okay, who's going to want a 33-year-old divorcee with 3 kids? I mean, that's a lot to walk into, you know? And I'll be honest, I don't mean this in a negative way, but I didn't want to meet a woman who had kids. I mean, I had my 3 kids I needed to focus on. I wasn't making a ton of money yet. I was just starting out in the mortgage business. So like part of me was like, I had no even thought about dating again, no even thought about just trying to meet somebody. My focus was work, make money, take care of kids, and the thought of dating just wasn't even on my radar. And I actually met my fiance at the mortgage company. She was the processor there at the mortgage company, and she's totally on one end. She's the most introverted person you will ever meet. She does not like talking to people, being around people. So we barely saw her in the mortgage company. She was just somebody that just worked in this back room. And here I was, I'm super social. I'm talking to everybody. So like I was the annoying guy, the annoying new guy. And she was married, and like we didn't have any conversations about anything, honestly. Besides saying hi when I first met her, we had zero interactions. And then we had a Christmas dinner, and she was sat next to me, and she was talking to someone else, talking about her relationship and how she thinks that she's going to be getting a divorce. And then I chimed in just because I was in the process of going through my divorce. And we just started talking. And what happened with her is her husband is from South Africa. My fiance is actually from Ireland. She's been over here for 24 years, but she's from Ireland. But her husband was from South Africa, and he just woke up one day and didn't want to be a firefighter anymore and wanted to go move to Thailand. And he said that she can come with him if she wants to. And she was like, what? And so it was one of these things where I think he was just, I don't know what it was, but he just needed to Peter Pan for a little bit and get out of town and do whatever. And that just obviously was the end of their relationship. I mean, she had a career, she had a house that was in her name, she had dogs, it just wasn't feasible. So their relationship was going through a whole messy little thing while mine was. So we talked that night, and that was it. Didn't think anything about it per se. And then a few months later, we go out after work, a bunch of colleagues at work, and we start talking. We end up talking for 7 hours. And then we kind of just talked as friends. We're kind of a shoulder. I told her that as crazy as my situation was, I'm still willing to get back with my ex, because of the whole redemption story, for the kids, for, just the fact, like, I didn't want to be a failure in marriage, if you want to even say that.
Yeah.
There were so many reasons I had, from a biblical standpoint, all that. I didn't want to get divorced. My parents have been married now for 40 something years. And so I felt like, I talk about letting my parents down. Like that was part of it. It wasn't just financially letting them down, not being a successful person. It was, not having my marriage last. So she knew when we were just, like I said, just friends, she knew that I was kind of waiting around to kind of see, was there going to be a redemption story? Was something going to come out of this? And then other stuff happened several months later that just made me realize that me and my ex-wife weren't going to work out. She had a fake police report on me for domestic violence because I went over there one night and she was passed out with the kids, and I took the kids and I sent her a text, said, hey, I didn't want to wake you up. You're passed out. I had a picture of her passed out in bed, fully clothed, at 7 o'clock in the summertime, which is light outside. So it's not like it was dark outside. Kids were super young. So I took the kids, and I wake up the next morning to a voicemail saying that I needed to call the sheriff's office. And so I had to go into jail for 5 hours until my attorneys got it all figured out, and obviously we were able to show them the evidence. But when that happened, I knew for my safety and the kids' safety that I kind of just had to move on, because the kids weren't safe when they were with her, because we were still going through our custody battle. And this stuff just led to me getting sole custody. But regardless, she knew that. So to kind of circle back to the fiance story, it's not the most romantic beginning because we're both going through our messes, and everybody in life has their own messes, and we were going through our messes. But I think now looking back, that's one of the things that's made us the strongest is she knows what type of guy I am, that I was still, even after a lot of stuff, open to getting back with my ex for the relationship, for the kids. She knew I wasn't just out there to go hook up with someone and lead them on and different stuff. So I think it laid a good foundation for us up front. And yeah, I mean, ever since then, we've worked together now for I guess 7 years, and worked together and engaged and should be getting married here soon.
Well, congratulations. That's
Thank you.
that's really good, and it does raise a good point. I've actually worked with some clients who have their own situations, and to attract the right woman, regardless of your scenario, you need to be a man that holds some standards like that, right?
Right.
And so in your case, it's like, look, I've got a difficult situation. I'm not going to buckle on these things for a lot of reasons, and if maybe things change in the future, we can have that, we can
Right.
start dating or whatever. But like for right now, I just got to be very transparent with you. That's not really in the cards for me, and your story is a great example of how being firm like that with the right things attracts the right type of woman who's actually going to be
Right.
a wonderful wife and mother to your kids, right? And
Yep.
and so for the younger men listening too, right? Maybe you're just becoming an adult and looking to date, to marry, right? These are things you need to be very clear on. Like, these are non-negotiables for my life, right? These are my beliefs. These are my values. I'm not going to compromise these things just to appease you. And you may lose a relationship or two early on, right? She may not want the second or third date early on, but then eventually you're going to find the right woman who appreciates the fact that you're a man of character and of your word, and it will set that strong foundation, to your point, that sets your marriage up for success, as opposed to you've both been caving for different reasons, and now you've got a huge mess to untangle, right? So I think that's a really great example, kind of a messy situation, but it's a great example
Right.
for men to realize like how important it is to hold those standards for yourself.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of guys are just scared of losing that possible potential partner. And you're right. You need to have your set standards because, one, it'll deter the ones that aren't going to fit you anyway because they don't have the same standards. But then, two, it's going to be more attractive to the one who does have those same standards and is looking for those standards. But on top of that, though, you got to go through with it. I had so many friends that were like, I'm not going to have sex till I'm married, and I'm not going to do this, and in high school. And then, obviously things change. So like, I'm big on having standards for sure. And I think most men need to raise their standards in a lot of aspects in their lives, but it's about sticking to it. If you're going to say it, do it. I have that rule with my fiance, with the kids. Like, hey, if we tell them they're punished for something, we're sticking to it. We're not going to be we punish the kids and say, you can't have technology or you can't do this. And then they know that they're going to get it later, because so many parents do that. I said, we got to make sure that whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or whatever we're talking about, when we say something, people can count on us. And I think that in relationships more than anything, and also business relationships, but your spousal relationship is your most important relationship. And if you're going to start it off with having standards, you better live up to them.
Well, I want to circle back really quick before I ask my question, because there's something that was so crucial that could literally save a dad's future with his children. You mentioned that you had evidence, and that's what got you out of this false accusation,
Yeah.
right? And women usually they weaponize this kind of stuff against the man, and the court system, let's be honest, is already leaning away from the man and towards the woman. So pointing out that, if you're in any kind of situation where you're having to take your kids from the person that has custody of them at the time, the recording, the evidence, the things that show that you've done what you said you did, and you've done it in a safe and a legal manner, that is such a crucial thing for the dads that are going through that right now. Because, man, that person can, like, if you didn't have that evidence of her passed out, you could have been in jail and your kids could have been her full custody,
Right.
And that's such a scary thing to think about.
Yeah, that's a great point, because another one of my mistakes early on was not sharing with people what was going on. I wanted to protect my wife. So almost nobody knew she had a prescription pill issue or drinking issue. And
Mm.
so when we got divorced and she was going around saying all this things she was saying, people had no choice but to believe her because they don't know for the last year and a half, we have been dealing with this issue. She has a therapist for this issue. She's been away to treatment center for this issue. They didn't know this because I didn't want people to look at her poorly. Even my own parents, anytime they call and ask how things are going, I said things are going good, up until obviously things took a big turn for the worse. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, I wish I would have had more evidence because there was plenty of times in the past where she had passed out or, pictures of hidden wine bottles or vodka bottles. So I have a buddy who was kind of going through something. And I said, listen, I said, I'm praying that your marriage works out. I'm praying that you change. I'm praying that she changes. I'm praying that you guys finally get back in church and get into with a good therapist. I said, but for your kids' sake and your future's sake, if stuff does happen, just document it. Don't tell her you're documenting it. Don't do anything to exacerbate it or make this worse because your goal is to save this marriage. But in the event that things just don't go that way, she's going to have recordings of you saying stuff. The women are good at that. And if you don't have anything and she has stuff and you go to court, you're done. So yeah, that's a key thing is have evidence in that horrible situation if it goes that way.
Richard, we got a couple like typical questions about fatherhood
Okay.
we love to ask every dad on the show. So the first one is, what is a piece of advice, if you could travel back in time, Richard, today, go back and talk to your younger self, a piece of advice you wish you would have had prior to having your first child about fatherhood?
About fatherhood? I mean, maybe just that you're not going to do it perfect and you don't need to be perfect. I mean, your kids are going to love you and look at you like you're perfect. This is kind of like a dog. If you have a pet, they don't, know who their parents are in that sense. They just love you because you're the owner. And that's kind of how kids are. Kids love you. So I think a lot of times, especially as you're entering fatherhood, you're worried about, am I going to be a good dad? Am I going to be a good enough or a good provider? Your kids don't care anything about except your presence. They want you to be present with them and pay attention to them. Daddy, look at me. Daddy, look at me. That's what they care about. And so I guess that probably would be something I'd go back and change.
Awesome. And one last rapid fire father question. What is just one of your favorite core memories with your children?
Whew. Honestly, living at my brother's house when I had just gotten sole custody of them, and I couldn't afford my own place yet, and we were living in he had like a carport he converted, so we turned that into it looked like a little hostel with me and three kids and our little beds in there. But I mean, one of the lowest points in my life, but one of the best and happiest times. I got videos of them dancing around in the room. There was one room I converted and I called it the prayer room because I was just doing so much praying back then. It's where I did my devotionals and Bible studies, and they would come in there and have a video. My daughter's probably 2 or just under 2, and she's dancing on the table. And, that's just something. I mean, God always provides. And I'm not just talking about financially. I mean, he provides the right people at the right time, the right situations. It's not our timing. And I look back at that and I realized that, wow, that was a God thing. And that was God's timing.
Yeah, and it's such a great example too of like gratitude, right? And contentment and fulfillment don't necessarily mean you have lots of stuff or that everything is going perfect, right?
Yep.
And what a beautiful example of that, man. That's just, yeah, that's such a great example. I love that. Richard, what's coming up for you? I know you've got some books, so where can people kind of find you? Tell us a little bit about everything you're working on and how people can either get engaged with you or follow along.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, Richard Bischoff on Instagram. I'm really just getting stuff going on the coaching side. As I was a personal trainer for so many years and had degrees in the health field, I got out of personal training mostly because back then it was all done in person. And so for me, it was like you can only trade so many dollars for hours in person, trade your time for hours in person, and you were maxed out. Then with technology and social media, so much of coaching is done online. My coaches, I only have one in-person coach. The other 2 are online. The world is so connected online. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get back into doing something that I love and have always loved and help men get back in shape because I believe that's one of the quickest and easiest things we can change. I think men need to change a lot of things in areas in your life, but your body is something that you have full control over. And it's not like a relationship where there's two people involved. This is something that you have full control over. So, and then when men get control of their body and they build that discipline, they can use that discipline in other areas of their life. They can gain a little bit of confidence. They can finally keep a promise they made to themselves by showing they were able to stick to a commitment. So that's what I got back into coaching. One of my books is called From Dad Bod to Six Pack. And it's just, a simple guide. It's nothing crazy. People are selling online workout programs for $20-$30 just for a workout program, and I got a little workout program inside my book that I only charge $9.99 for. And it talks about nutrition and supplementation and other things. And that book was expanded off a chapter from my main book, which is called The Self-Disciplined Man. And I wrote that book because I believe self-discipline is the key ingredient to becoming the person that you were created to be. Without self-discipline, you will not be who God created you to be. You won't live up to your full potential as a spouse, as a coworker, as a child of God, as a father, whatever you want to say, if you are not disciplined. And I looked at the areas of my life where I was the most disciplined. That's where I had the most success. And then the areas of my life where I was the least disciplined, I had the least success. So in that book, I kind of talk about that on different subjects, and they can find that on Amazon.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I agree. Self-discipline is a huge factor to any level of success in any aspect of life. So I love the title of that book. And any closing thoughts for the audience? Any last thing you want to finish with?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we can talk about, and everybody's going through different issues. The big thing that I just want people to know is, number one, you're not stuck where you are. You can change your identity. You can change your job. When I say your identity, these days people think I'm talking about other stuff, but you can change the way.
Yeah,
you can change the
do
way.
A whole episode on clarifying that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like I tell people all the time, like if you keep using the fact that you're an introvert as an excuse on why you're not talking and networking, like it's going to keep you locked down. But you're not a tree. You can grow. You can change. You just have to be willing to do it. And I tell people all the time, you need to be on a passionate pursuit of the best version of yourself. And you're not going to be the best version of yourself if you're not trying to grow spiritually, physically, financially. It's not just one area. I see too many men who are in shape but broke, or rich and don't have a good family relationship. And that's not a complete man. And I want men to be a complete man so they can have a complete life, but also so they can make a bigger impact on the world. The world needs stronger men. In this day and age, if there's one thing we know for sure, the world needs stronger men, morally, physically, financially, spiritually, just ready to go. So yeah, if you're a guy watching this right now or listening to this right now, just make that commitment to raise your standards and just become the best version of yourself.
Man, couldn't agree more. That's exactly what we preach in Elite Sentinel coaching, and it's needed, right? Men, it's time to step up, time to grow in all aspects of your life and start leading for real. And so we'll close with that, guys. Look Richard up, follow him. He's a very awesome guy, very motivational. Richard, it was awesome having you on. Thank you so much for sharing courageously with your story and all of your hardships and how you've overcome them. And with that, dads, let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.